What's the fact that sounds like a conspiracy theory? That land is private property. It sounds like a conspiracy, but when we research its legal roots way back in the time to the enclosure of the commons and elsewhere, it's indeed a fact, born out of genocide after genocide. With a piece of paper and the power of the courts and their associate mafia of police and military, one can indeed claim ownership over land, soil, and stone, but not the wild beasts, and declare it private. Whatever that means, but it's true. Just one of the many catastrophes of the enlightened individual. The Trump campaign colluded with Russia in 2016. Trump's campaign manager gave GOP polling data to a Kremlin agent. Went in prison for lying about it, before Trump pardoned him. That's Russian collusion. There was insufficient evidence to claim Trump himself colluded, although the final report does document 11 instances where Trump himself obstructed the investigation, including when he literally fired the head of the FBI and said publicly it was to end the investigation. The US government once experimented with a program called MKUltra, which aimed to research mind control and behavioral modification techniques. The Central Intelligence Agency CIA ran this program from the 1950s to the 1970s, involving various controversial and ethically questionable experiments, including the use of drugs like LSD on unsuspecting subjects. While it might sound like a conspiracy theory, MKUltra is a well-documented historical fact. Several of the top medical journals are funded by pharmaceutical companies, as are many politicians, and a lot of people in the FDA have industry histories. You can't expect most research to be unbiased, and bias in what research makes it to publication is rampant. Also, the FDA doesn't run clinical trials, it regulates them. The companies get away with a lot to make their products look good when doing the tests. In the United States between 1932 and 1972, the CDC intentionally neglected to inform hundreds of Black Americans that they were infected with syphilis. The goal was to study the effects of syphilis in Black people when left untreated, meaning it was imperative that the patient be unaware that they were infected. Many of them died to the untreated illness. Edited remedied some misinformation. Project Sunshine, in which the US government, in the wake of dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ordered a major study to better understand the effects of radiation exposure nuclear fallout on the human body, so an international network of agents was recruited to locate recently deceased children, and steal body parts from them to use for testing. COINTELPRO is straight up conspiracy theory sounding, but 10,000 true. They even sent letters to 8093 King's suicide letter to MLK telling him to commit suicide. No wonder people believe that the US government is probably doing other shady shit, because they probably are. The grandfather of President George W. Bush, father of George H. Bush, tried to overthrow the government and install an oligarchy dictatorship, then we elected his kid and grandkid president. Also Operation Northwoods, and that time we sprayed radioactive waste over St. Louis to see what happens to people living with a low level of background radiation. MKUltra was a top-secret CIA project in which the agency conducted hundreds of clandestine experiments, sometimes on unwitting US citizens, to assess the potential use of LSD and other drugs for mind control, information gathering, and psychological torture. There's a book by Tom O'Neill that lays it all out. Honestly reads like fiction. The sugar industry paid nutrition researchers to blame fats for health problems that were often correlated to sugar consumption. From this we have all the nonsense about good fats, bad fats, etc. Operation Gladio. The CIA and NATO placed teams of operatives all over Europe with the plan of being overrun, should the Soviets invade, then acting as rebel cells. What ended up happening is a bunch of right-wing psychos went around killing anyone who was a remotely left-wing organizer or just became bank-robbing criminals. It's been proven in a mock civil trial that James Earl Ray definitely did not kill Martin Luther King Jr. Even the King family believes he did not. The most damning piece of evidence is that the rifling marks on the recovered .3006 round in the barrel rifling on the Remington 760 recovered near the scene do not match. That PR and advertising firms are actively engaging in psychological warfare to push certain viewpoints and values in both implicit and explicit ways. If you control a person's thoughts, emotions and reactions, then you can begin to control their behavior in almost any sphere of life. Well, it's a well-known fact, Sonny Jim, that there's a secret society of the 5 wealthiest people in the world, known as the Pencabaret, who run everything in the world, including the newspapers, and meet triannually at a secret country mansion in Colorado, known as the Meadows. At its peak the Mafia was active in 32 major American cities with a smaller presence or satellite operations in multiple others. They exercised great influence on local commerce and labor unions with the quiet consent of politicians on all levels of government. Here to let everyone know that just by calling something a conspiracy theory doesn't make it false. There are many theories academics and scientists present them to build knowledge, and some are about conspiracies. Some conspiracies happened, others didn't. GM, IBM, and Ford played a major role in rearming Germany in the 1930s. George Bush's grandfather, Senator Prescott Bush, was a director and shareholder of companies that profited from their involvement with the financial backers of the German forces. There's a psychological reaction called the backfire effect, which essentially means that people, after they're given proof that what they think they know is absolutely wrong, will believe their misinformation even more deeply. 50% of the world's population has a parasite in their brains that comes from domestic cats, and this parasite can alter your behavior and thinking. It's linked to tuberculosis, dementia and other serious illnesses. A cartel run out of Switzerland got all the top light bulb manufacturers to limit bulb life to 1,000 hours so that they could sell more. Phoebus Cartel. America does what Israel tells them because Ghislaine Maxwell's father, who was a member of Mossad, used Jeffrey Epstein to honeypot the higher-ups of both the GOP and the DNC. The government knows exactly who killed Kennedy, how and why they did it. The only thing I'm not convinced they can prove upon a reasonable doubt is that they were involved. High place phenomenon. Urge to jump into the void when in high places for apparently normal healthy individuals and is rather commonplace feeling, says the literature. There is a formally secret organization of politicians and businessmen over a vast number of countries that influence decision-making, known as the family. 15 out of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 were Saudis. The US authorities shut down a lot of evidence to the families affected. The court cases are ongoing. Napoleon's penis was amputated post-mortem and has since been bought and sold multiple times. 27's penis. Nice try, Mr. CIA. You're just trying to see which ones have failed and tuning the latest ones like Pigeon's man covers. Colin Powell went before the United Nations and cited false and misleading information in order to justify invading Iraq. The UK government secretly tested biological weapons on its own coastal towns to see how far they could make it inland. Big Bird and Walter Cronkite were both considered to be a part of the Challenger expedition, the one that blew up. The US government did biological warfare testing on the public in San Francisco. Bioweapon testing in San Francisco. How big tobacco companies deny the health risks of smoking, despite internal knowledge of the dangers. The US financial markets are wholly and completely rigged and there's nothing anyone will do about it. The CIA funded and organized the overturn of several South and Central American socialist governments. JFK's brain was removed during autopsy and stored in an archive. Its current whereabouts are unknown. World War I was sparked by the assassination of a major world figure by a secret society known as Black Hand. CIA sold weapons to Iran to finance far-right rebel terror group in Nicaragua. Pakistan just recently stopped polio vaccinations due to attacks on aid workers. Pineapples are actually alien eggs planted on Earth to observe human behavior. The US government settled for their role in the MLK assassination. The US systematically destabilized many countries in South America. The previous president of the US tried to steal an election. The Hawaiian royalty was toppled by a fruit company dole. Lots of people in Pakistan knew where bin Laden was hiding. The CIA introduced meth into the inner cities of America. That the Earth is a sphere and not flat with a firmament. The FBI had agents within the January 6th protesters.